Hello there. How's everyone doing? Luciano Oliveira Lawyers. Today is January the 12th, and now it's 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time. We are getting started with one more live stream, and I'm gonna ask you to please let me know if you can see me okay, if you can hear me okay. Want to make sure that our connection is working as it should. And we have a DB holder. Hey, DB, good to see you over here. DB has a question for us. My fiancée says that now if she receives a PIX above 5,000 reais, the bank has to relay data to the Brazilian Revenue Service. Are you aware of this new rule? Is it per incident or per a certain period of time? All right, DB, that's something that is really going on as we speak, and interesting enough, like Brazilians, they are kind of concerned, as many of you know, Brazilians, they use Pix a lot. So for those of you who don't know, like Pix is a banking tool that is usually built into your internet banking, and it does allow you to pay. It does allow you to pay using internet bank, so you can pay someone else, like by clicking a couple of buttons, and the other person is going to receive this money. Automatically. So there is no delay. You send right now, the other person gets the money right now. You can use a Pix to send the money to another person. You can use a Pix to pay your bills. You can use Pix for pretty much everything. And like the novelty of the Pix is that first you don't pay a fee. So traditionally, Brazilian banks and the government as well, they're going to take some money every time you pay. Prior administration, President Bolsonaro's administration, it has been a complete game changer for banking when it comes to Brazilians, right? Because again, before people would pay money to send remittances to someone else, and nowadays everybody can send as many Pix as they want through most of the banks without paying any fee at all. And so this is a pretty big deal, and it's also instantaneous, right? And before, it could take up to a day for the remittance to materialize. And it is somewhat similar to those of you who are in the United States. There is something similar, and that's Zelle. Have you heard about Zelle? Zelle. So I would say Zelle, it's like, let's say, is not as well developed, believe it or not, as Pix. So Pix, the Brazilian version of Zelle, is way ahead of Zelle because it has lots of, not tools, because if I say tools, it's going to sound complex, but it has lots of features that make Pix such a convenience. All right, so that's what DB is talking about. This is the Pix. And up to now, people would just send, Pix to everyone else and with no consequences, right? Like meaning, the government wasn't really tracking the Pix activity. But now, there is a lot of concern from Brazilians because the government is starting to track the remittances through Pix. And DB is saying, well, if someone receives a Pix above 5,000 reais, the bank is going to have to inform the Brazilian Revenue Service that the person is receiving 5,000 and more in Pix. And therefore, Brazilians are saying, am I going to need to pay taxes on it, right? And of course, nobody knows exactly how this is going to work. But the point is, yes, and I think, this is customary across the banks and across the bank systems, whatever you're doing with money, right? Whenever you are moving money over a certain limit, the banks are bound to inform the government about such remittances, right? Like in the United States, customarily, if you go to a bank branch and you deposit like over 10,000 in cash, the bank is going to need to send a report to the authority saying, listen, John Doe came here and deposit, like $10,001 in cash, right? Now, if you think it is true, you're going to realize that Pix is almost like cash, because it is such a convenient tool that people are basically using Pix for pretty much everything. I'm going to give you an example, and it's really astonishing, at least to me. Nowadays, when you are in Brazil and you are in some downtown areas, and there are people like homeless people, they may ask you for some money, right? And if you don't say, well, I don't have cash on me, they are gonna have an answer right off the bat. Every single one of them, they're gonna say, well, you can send me a Pix, okay? So even like homeless people, they have access to Pix, and they are gonna be happy to receive a Pix, right? Pretty different than Zelle in the United States, but I'm sharing this just to give you an idea about the dimension that Pix as an internet banking tool has for Brazilians. And then maybe you're going to ask, well, but homeless people, they don't really have bank accounts, and that's the really amazing thing. So some companies, usually companies related to consumers, let's say a supermarket, they may have a card for the supermarket that is capable of receiving a Pix. So even a person who's homeless, in theory, they could have a Pix number and receive money that would go into their supermarket card. And with the supermarket card, the homeless person, even if this person doesn't have a bank account whatsoever, they could go to the supermarket and buy food. Right? Isn't that amazing or what? I mean, I think Pix is, such a revolutionary tool, and that's why Brazilians use it for pretty much everything. And so going back to DB's question, yes, that's for sure. Like now banks are going to be bound to report Brazilians who are sending or receiving, right? For the matter, sending or receiving Pix remittances. Over 5,000, the number is not settled yet, right? Like in theory, it could be over 1,000 reais, it could be over 5,000, over 10,000. Maybe they are going to start with 5,000 and then they are going to adjust that number later on. Now, the point is the fact that the bank is informing the Brazilian Revenue Service of the transaction, it doesn't mean necessarily that the person is going to be taxed. It just means that the Brazilian Revenue Service is going to have one more piece of information to decide if this person should be audited or not, right? Again, just because you received Pix or because you sent Pix, and of course, like the person is not going to be taxed on that money. However, again, if you're declaring to the Brazilian Revenue Service that you're making, 10,000 reais a year, and you've been receiving, 50,000 reais in the year, naturally, this person should be audited, of course, from the Brazilian Revenue Service perspective, because how can you say that you're getting 10,000 as income for the year if your Pix is receiving 50,000? Does it make sense? But again, just like in any other taxation system, that's just a piece of information. Now, if the Brazilian Revenue Service decides to audit a person, this person has all the liberty in the world to present evidence to why the person received this money. Okay, so I'm gonna give you an example. Like we do a lot of renovations, like for some of our clients, we kind of help with the renovation side of things. They buy a property, they need to do some renovation. They are keeping the property with the firm for management of the amounts and so on. And when we are interacting with the contractors, it's very common for contractors to say, you know what, I'm gonna buy here, like, I don't know, like $2,000 worth of construction materials, and here are the bills, right? So they send us the bills, and what we do, we're gonna send the money through PIX to the contractors. So using the same example I was sharing with DB, if the contractor is getting $2,000, right, it doesn't mean that the $2,000 are income, right? The $2,000 were actually money that they are receiving to buy something as our agents. And, like the contractor is going to have, this possibility of, if they are audited, right, of presenting go and present the evidence, like, the receipts for all the construction material that they bought. And, the Brazilian Revenue Service is going to say, all right, like, I understand. You got, I don't know, you got 100,000 US dollars in a year, but out of these 100,000, your income was actually just 30, because I see over here that 70,000 was actually bought in construction material, right? So yes, DB, that's true. Okay, we don't know the exact numbers, the exact dynamic, but this, let's say, this kind of approach of the Brazilian Revenue Service of being fed information from other points of contact is pretty customary. I'm going to give you two other examples of something similar to what we're talking about over here. Like when you buy a property in Brazil and you go to the closing office, right, to the cartório, whenever you are handling the paperwork, the registry officer, they are going to send a report to the taxation authority, right? And they don't need to tell you, right? Like, I mean, I know that because I am from this field, but most people, they don't know about it. They're just going to buy properties and say, well, I hope the government doesn't know. The government always knows, right? Whenever you buy properties or whenever you're selling properties, the government is going to be informed about the transaction, about the amounts, about who's buying and who's selling. Okay, so that's a very similar example to how PIX is going to work. A third one, whenever you send the money to Brazil, so even if the person is not using PIX whatsoever, when money enters Brazil, in order for the bank or for the financial entity to release that money, they need to tell the Brazilian government, or more specifically, the Brazilian Taxation Authority, the tax ID, the CPF for the person who's receiving the money. Okay, so the government actually knows about, all the monies entering the country. Now, another perspective to this is that, there is so much in terms of games being played by people in Brazil that, in my opinion, and of course, like, you need to consult with a tax advisor to get a more technical perspective on that. Like, I'm not a tax attorney, right? I have a more generic understanding of taxation. But the Brazilian Revenue Service, they have limitations in terms of how many people they're going to audit. So they are not going to, pick everyone. It's impossible for them to audit everyone. They are going to audit the most extreme cases, just like in the United States. All right, DB, I hope that was helpful. Providence, welcome back, Providence. In Portuguese, can you explain to my fiancée, Monica, how the clock stops when applying for a retirement residency, difference between visa and residency? All right, Providence, thank you for asking this question. That's I'm going to start with the visa and residency. That's a pretty common mistake, and it gets to a point in which usually I don't explain the distinction because, people just say visa, and I play along as it was a visa. But there is a clear distinction between a visa and a residency. So a visa, a Brazilian visa, right? I'm not talking about the United States. I'm not talking about other countries. I'm talking about Brazil. So for Brazil, visas are only issued abroad. Okay, only issued abroad. So if we're talking about the retirement visa, The only place in which you can get a retirement visa is going to be through a consulate, not any other place in the world. Some people are going to say, well, but you're forgetting about the embassy. Yes, guess what? An embassy has a consular function. So whenever you go to an embassy, you are actually going to a consulate within an embassy, right? So 100% of the Brazilian visas issued, they are going to be issued by a Brazilian consulate, even when you go to an embassy, or even when you do an e-visa, right? When you do an e-visa, you're going to use a company called VFS. They are a private entity, but they are a private entity operating on behalf of a Brazilian consulate. So there you go. 100% of the visas are issued through a consulate and never in Brazil. So if we need to be technical here, I'm going to tell you it's impossible for anyone to get a visa in Brazil. You got to be abroad, meaning not in Brazil. Now, here is the residency side of things, right? The residency is pretty much just like a visa, but the residency is going to be granted only in Brazil. Meaning, you travel to Brazil, and nowadays Americans, they don't need any visa to travel to Brazil, so you can come to Brazil, just buy a ticket, go to American Airlines and come to Brazil, come to São Paulo, Rio, or any other city in Brazil, and you don't need a visa whatsoever. So you're just coming under a visa waiver. There is no visa waiver, right? You came without a visa. Now, let's say that 1 month down the road, you're and you say, you know what? I don't want to stay here for just 3 months. I want to stay for a whole year, okay? I want to stay for a whole year. So what are you going to do? Are you going to ask for a visa? No, you cannot ask a visa because, again, visas are not issued in Brazil. So what you're going to do, you're going to apply for a residency, right? And more specifically for the retirement, you can apply for a retirement residency while you're in Brazil, and you can be granted the residency that's going to allow you to stay for up to 2 years as a retiree. And after 2 years, believe it or not, you can migrate to the permanent residency as of 2025. All right. So there you go. These are the two distinctions. All right, Providence. I see. I remember you saying in Portuguese. I'm just explaining first in English because like 99% of our audience is of English speakers, and then I'm going to explain in a summarized manner into Portuguese. But I'm sure you can also relay what I'm explaining to your fiancé. Okay, so these are the distinctions. Now, whenever we are onboarding clients, we try not to focus too much on those distinctions because for the person who's going to receive the benefit, they don't care about technicalities, right? They just care about remaining in Brazil. And therefore, we're not going to be, like hammering the difference between residency and visa. So many of our pages on our website, they don't talk about residency. They just talk about visa, because that's how everybody out there talk about, the digital nomad. They talk about the retirement. They talk about, the student. And nowadays we are calling track, because then we don't need to talk about residency, which sometimes, gets people confused. And whenever we say track, the person is going to, if they imagine like a visa, that's all right. If the person has more advanced knowledge about, Brazilian immigration, they are going to understand we're talking about the residency, all right? Now, let me summarize in Portuguese. So I'm going to be really brief because, again, Providence, I'm going to apologize, but Portuguese language is not like the language of our live streams. Mas, explicando então, a pedido de Providence, existem dois tipos, basicamente, não é, de benefícios imigratórios no Brasil. Um deles é o visto, que sempre vai ser emitido por um consulado. Não existe visto emitido fora do consulado. Mesmo quando você vai para uma embaixada, na verdade, a embaixada tem um departamento que é o consulado dentro da embaixada, e vai ser o consulado que vai emitir esse visto. Em outras palavras, ninguém consegue ter um visto emitido dentro do Brasil, ok? Agora, Por outro lado, existe a chamada residência legal. A residência legal é bastante similar a um visto, mas a residência legal ela é emitida apenas dentro do Brasil. Então, diferentemente do visto, que só pode ser emitido no exterior, a residência só pode ser emitida no Brasil. Aqui na firma, a gente evita ficar falando muito dessas duas distinções. Porque acaba mais confundindo do que ajudando a pessoa a entender. Oliuni, eu acabei de ver aqui. Oliuni, I just saw you mentioning that the audio is kind of freezing, skipping. Is it still happening? Let me know, please. Thank you for sharing update, by the way. And terminando aqui a explicação a pedido da Providence. Então, se você estiver no Brasil, né, e a Providence estava falando de aposentadoria, então no Brasil você pode pedir a residência por aposentadoria, que é exatamente a mesma coisa do que o visto, mas ela é feita no Brasil. Se a pessoa estiver no exterior, ela vai pedir então o visto de aposentado. Mas as duas coisas são muito parecidas e a única diferença é que uma é pedida no consulado e a outra é pedida no Brasil. Nós preferimos o pedido no Brasil porque quando você pede no Brasil, você não precisa do plano de saúde, tá? E quando a pessoa faz o pedido lá fora, ela tem que mostrar um plano de saúde para poder ser aprovada. E esses planos de saúde que o estrangeiro pode comprar, infelizmente, não são os mesmos que a gente tem. São planos de saúde para gringo, ou seja, eles são mais caros e não são tão úteis. All right, Providence, I hope that was helpful. Just explained the difference between visa and residency. Let's just talk now very briefly about, how the clock stops, right? So let's say if someone enters Brazil, again, under a waiver, let's say a US citizen enters Brazil under a waiver, no visa whatsoever, and then this person is in Brazil like 2 months down the road. And the period that you are allowed to stay in Brazil is like 3 months. Okay, 3 months is not 6. For you to get to 6, you need to ask for an extension. Maybe you're gonna get it, maybe you're not gonna get it, right? So once you are in Brazil, you can file for a residency, and based on Providence's example, you could file, for instance, for the retirement residency, and as soon as you file, you stop the clock, meaning that after your application is in the immigration system, right? Not in your head. It gotta be the immigration system. After you file the application, the Brazilian immigration is gonna say, you know what? This person has applied for an immigration benefit, and for as long as it takes for us to either approve or deny, this person is gonna be authorized to remain in Brazil without accruing additional days against their quota. Okay, that's pretty much the concept, and that's how many of our clients get the peace of mind that they can remain in Brazil while their visas while their residencies are being processed. Right now, just a heads up, whenever people come to us, we cannot file for a residency application on the day after. Particularly for the retirement, there are many documents that you're going to need to obtain from abroad. And these documents, about 4 or 5 or even 6 of them, they are going to need the so-called apostille, which is like a type of notarization, legalization provided usually by the Secretary of State in the state in which the document is being issued. So those things, they take time, right? Like you cannot come to us and say, well, but I'm gonna hire you as long as you file in 2 weeks. Like if you say so, you're probably not a good match for us. We don't do rushed things here at the firm. We could do that probably in a month and a half. So even if you come into Brazil under a waiver, our recommendation is usually like this. Listen, maybe you're traveling to Brazil right now, maybe you didn't have time to handle your documents. But remember, we should start your work before you actually leave your country, because then a month and a half down the road, we're going to be in a position to file your application, all right? Don't come to us like, 2 weeks to expire your allowed time in Brazil and say, well, I'm going to hire you as long as you can file in 2 weeks. Not a good idea. All right? So there you go. Now, in Portuguese, for Providence Fiancé. Então, a ideia de parar o relógio que a gente fala é assim, quando você aplica para o processo de residência no Brasil, no momento que essa aplicação ela é feita na imigração, aí você não conta mais os dias contra a cota da pessoa que fez o pedido de residência. Então, no exemplo do pedido de residência por aposentadoria, se você tiver 2 meses no Brasil e você fizer, né, o filing, se você fizer a aplicação, quer dizer, a aplicação entrar no sisteminha, no sistema eletrônico da imigração, a partir daquele momento, o governo brasileiro vai deixar essa pessoa em paz, tranquilinha, enquanto essa aplicação estiver sendo processada. Então, se a pessoa estiver no Brasil durante 2 meses, naquele momento que ela fez o pedido de aplicação, os 2 meses fica parado ali. Ou seja, não vai continuar contando e eventualmente começar a gerar multa para essas pessoas. Tá bom? Alright, Providence, there you go. Let us know if that was helpful or not. Oliuni, Happy New Year, Oliuni. How's it going? Are you in, let me see if I remember, last time I think you were in Florianopolis. Let us know, Oliuni, where you are right now. And let me know about the audio. Is it good? Is it bad? And let's proceed. All right. Okay, we have Mimo. All right, Mimo, welcome to the gang. Mimo says, my grandfather was a Brazilian citizen, but he didn't register my mother. All right, my grandfather was a Brazilian citizen, but he didn't register my mother. Am I eligible to obtain Brazilian citizenship or passport through descent? Mimo, you're not unless your mother first secures the citizenship, right? Which is kind of similar to the Portuguese one. For a grandchild to secure the citizenship, naturally the parent needs to secure first. Okay, so as long as your mother, if she's able to file for the citizenship, right, and there is a lot of legwork to be done, particularly if she never did when she was a child, right? I mean, because your grandfather didn't do the registration when your mother was a child, now it becomes more complex, right? But we handle such cases here at the firm very often, and I would recommend you to schedule a consultation to review your case in details. All right, Mimo, but again, as long as, I hope your mother is still around and in good health. In this case, she should secure, the citizenship first, and then you, Mimo, you would be allowed to apply for the citizenship down the road. All right, Ronnie, good to see you over here, Ronnie. Ronnie is always supporting our channel. Ronnie says, interesting, I was wondering how my Brazilian friends without bank accounts were receiving money through Pix. Pix is more advanced than Zelle. In the US, anything over 600 sent by app has to be reported. You see, that's very interesting. I didn't know that, Ronnie. That's a pretty interesting piece of information. And yes, I can tell you that Pix is, I don't know, maybe 100 times more advanced than Zelle. Sometimes, believe it or not, we do Pix transactions, like for real estate here at the firm, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we are sending a Pix, right? And this is like received automatically. It's amazing. Believe me, like it's years ahead of the United States in terms of internet banking. Now, you see, that was built, right? Like, and I hope it doesn't come true as a political support, but I'm just talking about, facts, right? Like the prior administration created the Pix from scratch. Now the current administration, guess what? They're saying, listen, we need to find a way to do what? To tax Pix. And I'm not talking about the taxation that we were discussing. We were discussing at the beginning of this live stream. I'm talking about taxing the transaction itself. So it's not like a concern with income tax. it's a concern to tax the PIX, meaning that every time you send a PIX, guess what? The government is going to go there and get, is going to shave off your money. That's the current administration, all right? So, political orientation aside, that's the difference in terms of creation. Same thing from the immigration side. Prior administration created the entire immigration framework that we have today. Retirement visa, digital nomad visa, investment, right? Residency through investment. Current one, 0 visas, 0 residencies, nothing at all, right? So just sharing so you can, have your own conclusions, okay? Let's move on. All right. All right, Bishop, welcome, Bishop. It has been a while. So good to see you back. You may have answered this earlier in the year, but to clarify, if retired in Brazil, the government will tax my retirement income again, even though the US has already taxed it. Yes, guaranteed, Bishop. Yes, Brazil is going to tax your retirement, okay? If you think it is true, like you're living in Brazil, you're not living in the United States, so you cannot live in Brazil and pay tax to someone else, right? And I know Uncle Sam is unforgiven. So even if you're living 100% of your time in Brazil, Uncle Sam is still waiting for their share. But listen, Uncle Sam actually gives you a break. I don't have like a lot of knowledge in taxation, right? Either Brazilian or American, but I do know that when you are most of the year outside of the United States, they are going to give you a tax break. All right, so that's the first good news. That's the first good news, Bishop. Second good news, Brazil is going to look into what you are paying abroad in taxes, and they are going to potentially, right, because you need a tax expert, a CPA to review your specifics, but in theory, Brazil is going to look at what you pay to Uncle Sam in taxes, and Brazil is going to allow you to use this amount paid in taxes, as a credit to your Brazilian tax liability. Okay, so that's the second good news. Third good news, Brazil has a special bracket for income tax of retirement nature, and if I'm not mistaken, is just 15%. All right, so I would say, if you allow me, and listen, feel free to tell me if you don't agree. I think Brazil is super reasonable, right? So first, Brazil is saying, I'm just gonna tax you 15%. That's the first thing. Second thing, I'm gonna give you a credit for whatever you're paying abroad. That's the second thing. And the third thing, the United States itself are gonna give you a break in the US. So I think it's pretty reasonable if you're gonna be living in Brazil, like to have such a tax load. Let me know what you think, Bishop. Paul Fonseca, good to see you again, Paul. I mean, I saw Paul before, now we're talking, right, Paul? I hope you're well, I hope your wife is well. Paul is asking, do you think the visa will be implemented in April for Americans wanting to visit Brazil? Paul, listen, it would be just a guess, right? But if I would have it to guess, I would say no, okay? And I'm going to try to be brief in the reasoning why Brazil is not going to implement the visa requirement on April the 10th, right? So quick recap, there is news, or there is actually formal official language by the Brazilian government that starting on April the 10th, US citizens, Canadians, and New Zealand and Australians, I'm not sure about the New Zealand, but I'm sure about the US, Canada, and Australia, that people from those countries, they are going to need to get a visa, right? And that's going to be an e-visa. So it's something that you don't need to go to the consulate. You can apply online. Yes, there is a bunch of documents you're going to need to present, the traditional Brazilian red tape and bureaucracy. But the point is, my point is, this is going to be the fourth time, believe it or not, that the President Lula administration is trying to enforce visa for people from those countries. And he couldn't do, in the prior 3 times. So if he couldn't do, in the prior 3 times, now I think he's even, less well positioned to enforce the visa requirement, unless, of course, there is so much dealing, self-dealing and dealing in the Brazilian Congress, between the Congress and the president, that I would say, if it is really important to him, he could say, you know what, I'm gonna let something else pass as long as you guys approve, the visa for U.S. citizens. But I know for a fact that there are much more important things for President Lula than, chasing citizens from the United States, Australia, and Canada. And therefore, my bet is that for the fourth time, the current administration is not going to be able to implement the visa requirement. All right, Paul, let me know if that was helpful. All right, we have a Mimo. Mimo, we only have an ID of him from the 40s. He didn't register the marriage as well. We don't have any relatives in Brazil. Mimo, what about your mother's birth certificate? Right? What about your mother's birth certificate? Because in your mother's birth certificate, your grandfather would show up over there, and potentially, hopefully, there would be a birth certificate somewhere for your grandfather, right? So what you're gonna need for your mother's process is gonna be her birth certificate, showing that naturally your grandfather is her father. And you're also going to need a birth certificate for your grandfather showing that he was Brazilian, right? And, in theory, such records are accessible in many states. Like, you can even run search. One big exception is Rio de Janeiro. I don't know why. It's more like, a collusion between like the registries in Rio de Janeiro to avoid people to search across the databases, so that people are going to need to spend more money asking for search in each individual registry, right? But in most of the country, like São Paulo, many states in the Northeast, the entire south of Brazil, states in the center west, in many states you can actually run search across databases. Okay, so I would say, it could be a matter of engaging someone to run such search. Unfortunately, it's not guaranteed that they are going to find the birth certificate for a father, but there is hope, all right? So I think that helps. All right. Okay, he registered the marriage only in the country of my grandma, Syria, and we can only get the Syrian documents of him and the marriage. Yeah, but right, I mean, there should be a birth certificate for a mother, right? So, the marriage is not like key over here. The key is going to be the birth certificate for your mother, showing that your grandfather was her father, and the birth certificate for your grandfather showing that he was Brazilian. Now, one thing I can tell over here, right, like because you mentioned in Syria, we have a lot of issues, and to the extent that we are refusing such assignments, unfortunately nowadays, we had other people, from Syria, from Lebanon, from the Palestine, like there is a lot of interchange between Brazil and those countries, believe it or not, but a lot, right? I'm not talking some. I'm talking about a lot. And unfortunately, when they do, like this cross-border type of thing, the spelling gets changed. And it's really difficult for us to, run search for different spellings, right? Because every different spelling would, in theory, be a different, search. And guess what? Search, they cost money. And therefore, it becomes like, searching for a needle in a haystack. That's kind of what happens, right? But yeah, that's something for you to consider, Mimo. Now that you are mentioning, Syria, I can tell you, there should be issues related to the spelling. And listen, Mimo, if you are, really pursuing. If you're really interested in citizenship in Brazil, there are other tracks, okay? I mean, there is the investment track, there are other tracks for you to first You know, of course, you're not going to go straight to the citizenship. First, you're going to go to the residency. But the thing here is, you know, you would first secure the permanent residency, and then after that, you would secure the citizenship. The citizenship is available to all permanent residents, right? Like in Brazil, customarily, after 4 years as a permanent resident, you can apply for Brazilian citizenship, all right? So, Mimo, the message here is like where there is hope, you know, where there is a strong desire, there is hope, you know, so don't lose your hope. And like I said, if you want to schedule a consultation, we are happy to discuss the potentially available paths for you. All right, Moses, good to see you over here. Moses is also supporting the group, the chat. Good afternoon, sir. First time you speak Portuguese. So interesting. Thank you, Moses. Thank you. When applying for naturalization, the language test will be done as a theory or verbal. All of them, Moses. And it's interesting that you're asking this question because this is, I would say, this is more challenging, and that's also precious information for Mimo, right? You know, like I would say, you know, learning the language is going to be more challenging than getting access to a track that's going to give you access to the citizenship, because it's not intermediary Portuguese, it's actually advanced Portuguese, Moses. So you need to write advanced Portuguese, you need to read advanced Portuguese, and you need to speak and, of course, understand advanced Portuguese, right? Now, the upside is that, you know, once you are in Brazil, the Brazilian culture is very different, for instance, from the U.S. culture, right? In the U.S., for many reasons, right? Like, I mean, the weather seasons, you know, the culture in general, people are very individual. In Brazil, it's impossible for you to stay in a shell. You're going to be exposed to Portuguese big time. And, you know, whether you want it or you don't want it, you're going to end up learning a lot of Portuguese, right? So it's just a matter of, you know, pushing you a little further, and you're gonna have a plenty of opportunity to learn Portuguese. All right, Moses? Yes, it is challenging, but it's also doable. All right, Providence, I have my consultation with you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Nervous now after your last answer. Yeah, I hope we still have things to discuss, Providence, but that's always the case. I know that when we start to discuss, you know, the specifics of your situation, there will be other questions that you're going to ask. So rest assured, our consultation is going to be pretty helpful, and I'm sure we're going to have a blast tomorrow, Providence. Thank you for scheduling the consultation. All right, we have Sarah. Sarah Liddy, when would you recommend those of us interested in eventually immigration to get CPF numbers? Should we get those numbers before we pursue any visas? It is possible to obtain without a Brazilian address. Sarah, so two different tracks, right? Like if you are really applying for a visa, right? I'm not sure if you were like at the beginning of our session today. If you are applying for a visa, 100% of the time, this is going to be done through a consulate. And consulates as of 2025, they are issuing the tax ID known as the CPF. All right. So if you are applying for a visa, you may very well apply for the CPF at the same time, because yes, you're going to need the tax ID known as a CPF. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do many things that you're going to need as a resident in Brazil. All right, Sarah. And there is no need for you to say, well, I need a CPF because, you know, I'm going to be, you know, applying for, I don't know, the digital nomad or the retirement visa or whatnot. You can basically say, listen, I need CPF. You know, I have maybe I'm going to buy a property in the future. You know, Brazil, the Brazilian consulates, they're going to accept a broad range of reasons for you to get a CPF. So yes, if you're applying for a visa, you may very well apply for a CPF at the same time. Now, if you are applying for residency, and when you apply for residency, is not through a consulate, it's only in Brazil, when you arrived in Brazil physically, we usually apply on behalf of our clients. Okay, we apply on behalf of our clients. And at that moment in time, yes, we're gonna need a Brazilian address because you are in Brazil already. But if you are applying through a consulate, then you're gonna be able to use your US address. You don't need a Brazilian address. But if you're applying for a residency and we're getting the CPF for you, yes, you're gonna need a Brazilian address, and I'm sure you're gonna have access to one because at that moment in time you're gonna be in Brazil. Okay, Sarah. So there you go, and usually the CPF is needed for several applications. So for instance, right, like when you work with us, we handle your residency application in Brazil, and we're gonna schedule the appointment for you to do your biometrics. At that moment in time, you need the CPF. Okay, so a lot of people, when they want to do things by themselves, right, usually they go to a consulate, they just do whatever, the form says, and then when they get to Brazil, like they don't know about the CPF, and then they're going to need to run after, like a public department to get the CPF issued, and it's not fun at all. So yes, if you're going to work through a firm like ours, we handle on your behalf. You don't need to worry about the CPF. If you're going to be applying to a visa, yes, my recommendation is for you to also secure a visa since you're going to be dealing with a consulate anyhow. All right, Paul. Yes, that's great to hear. Yes, Paul, there you go. That's my bet. We're going to know quite soon, right? Like, I mean, in a blink of the eye, it's going to be like February, March, and then April. And then we're going to know if the current administration is going to be able to get the visa requirement in place or not. So it's gonna not be too long down the road. All right, Sarah. All right. Also, thank you for doing these lives. Your channel content is super valuable. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate. These words are important to us, and as you may imagine, right? Like today is a Sunday, and we are doing this as a way to give it back to the community. We are very proud to be assisting other, clients just like you. So yes, your words are important to us. Thank you very much, Sarah. Ronnie, wanted to share. I'm excited. I have my ticket to visit Rio on January 21st. Only visited Fortaleza in the past. By the way, where I am right now, I am in Fortaleza, Ronnie. I will be staying in Santa Teresa per your recommendation. Obrigado. Yeah, Teresa, you're going to have a blast, Ronnie. But now there is something you're going to need to agree with us. You're going to visit our office in Rio de Janeiro. Our largest office in Brazil is in Rio de Janeiro, is in downtown. It's like a 15-minute Uber from our office, Ronnie. So there you go. You're going to need to visit our office for some Brazilian coffee and take a picture with our team, right? Do we have a deal or not, Ronnie? I want you to answer right now because then I'm going to have many witnesses, all right, to know that you are coming to our office, Ronnie. All right, and you're gonna be on January 1st. All right, yeah. I'm gonna be back in Rio. I believe it's gonna be in the first or second week of February. All right, so maybe I can see you over there. But again, our team is just as usual in Rio, so you're pretty welcome to drop by for some Brazilian coffee, for some cafezinho with us, Ronnie. Bishop, can you tell us what are the 5 to 6 documents needed to be apostilled for residency so we would already have them? Also, it seems that applying for residency is easier than applying for retirement, right? Yeah, so the residency, Bishop, it needs to be under a certain track, right? So residency is the technical term, right? Like if you apply abroad, it's a visa. If you apply in Brazil, it's a residency. Now, in addition to saying it's a visa or a residency, you also need to say which is the track or the basis for your residency, right? So a residency could be truth, retirement. It could be truth like a digital nomad. It could be truth like, studying. There are about 20 different tracks, right? Like most of them, they are obscure and, not really applicable to most people. I'm going to give you an example, right? Just to you know, get this out of the way. If you are a divorcee from a Brazilian, there is a residency for that, right? I was married to a Brazilian. I used to have a permanent residency. Now I'm separating. This person is not going to help me on my immigration path anymore. Don't worry, there is a specific residency just for the divorcees, right? So very obscure, not very popular. So Bishop, in your case, I believe the retirement residency would still be the ideal track. Okay. Now let's talk about the 5 to 6 documents, right? Like this is usually reviewed upon understanding your specifics. So I cannot tell you the exact 5 or 6 documents. I can give you more like examples, but some of them they are pretty standard. For instance, birth certificate, it gotta be somewhat fresh. You gotta have your parents' names on it. Okay, this is the birth certificate, and it must have an apostille. Second one, if you're doing by yourself, or if you're doing through a consulate, most probably you're gonna need an apostille on the criminal record. And actually, our firm is asking for it as well, just because there is no consistency, of reviewing by the immigration. Sometimes, they let go if you just presented the background check. Sometimes they're gonna ask for an apostille. So nowadays we are also asking for an apostille for the background check. So we spoke about the birth certificate, background check. Third one, that you have the $2,000 in retirement income, right? Like, so for instance, we have a large number of veterans, right? Like, literally, dozens and dozens of veterans we have from the United States, in Brazil, retiring for disability. Okay, so what we're gonna get from them is like the disability statement, like they get a statement monthly, on a monthly basis. This is gonna say how much they get in disability, the taxes, and the net amount. It gives like a complete breakdown on their name. So this is gonna be the third document, okay? Something that is showing that you're getting $2,000 in retirement income. So we spoke about 3 so far. Fourth one, they are gonna want something that is very interesting. Like, it's not natural, but it is something that they ask, proof that you can send the money to Brazil, right? So you're gonna either show that you did wire funds to Brazil before, or that your bank is writing a letter saying that your bank account in the United States has capability of wiring transfers, wiring money to Brazil. And this is gonna need an apostille as well, right? So that was 4 or 5, I guess. And then now we have another one, which is, like your bank statement showing that you're not only entitled to the money that is showing on the retirement statement, but you are actually getting this money into your checking account, right? So this is going to be the 50th or the 6th document that's going to need an apostille. And there may be others. I can give you just one example right off the bat. For instance, some people, right, not many people, but some people, they don't have $2,000 in retirement income. They have, for instance, kind of common. I have, 1,800. I have 1,900. Like it's so close to the 2,000 that the Brazilian government, right, prior administration, came with a path for those people to not be left, outside of the track. They said, listen, as long as most of your income is coming from a qualifying retirement income. What is a qualifying retirement income? We're talking about disability, Social Security. We're talking about pensions, right? We're talking about annuities, right? But maybe, you don't have, $2,000 in those qualifying type of retirement incomes. In this case, the Brazilian government is going to say, oh, okay, I'm going to let you add to the pool of income something like a property rental, right? So you could have a property rental, you could have savings, you could have, stock funds. So this is going to be like additional income to along with the traditional retirement income, help you achieve the $2,000 mark. All right, so there you go. Like, I think we spoke about 6 types of documents you're gonna need an apostille for. And what we are doing today, we are actually assisting people by handling the apostille requirement in our Dallas office, right? Like, you have a tiny location in Dallas, okay, with a single person. It's not like a fully formed office. Is more like, a support type of office. But over there, we can actually, receive documents and then have a second company, which is a partner company, handling the apostille process for us. They charge $100, okay, per apostille, which is much better when you go out there and you pay third parties for them to do the legwork. Usually they charge you $200 for the first document. Well, I don't know what's going on. Sorry about that. Something coming from the computer. All right. So, Bishop, I hope that was helpful. These are some examples of the documents that you're going to need for the retirement track. All right. We have Andrew. Andrew, it's good to see you over here. Andrew, what is the process like obtaining a Brazilian driver's license after obtaining residency? So, two different possibilities. One, you don't have a valid driver license. Maybe yours is expired. And if that's the case, it's going to be very difficult for you to obtain one. It could be like a 1-year thing and a few $1,000s in fees for you to get a driver license in Brazil. That's the worst case scenario, right? Now, let's say if you have a valid license and that's going to remain valid for a while, you could do a process to get a Brazilian driver license based on your existing driver license. And this process is much easier, all right? So basically, you're gonna go to a Brazilian state DMV, just like in the United States, in Brazil, our DMVs, they are also on a state level. And you're gonna present it's gonna be an apostilled copy of your driver license with a sworn translation. You're going to need to attend a physical examination, and you're going to need to attend a psychological evaluation. Those 3 things and a bunch of other documents are going to allow you to apply, and potentially, right, it's never guaranteed, but potentially you could be getting a Brazilian driver license that's going to be running on top of your license from abroad. So when you look at it, it's a Brazilian driver license, but it is based on your driver license abroad. All right, Andrew? We don't like, we don't like to provide this service just because it's cumbersome, it's bureaucratic, and usually clients, they don't really recognize the value of the work that we do because, well, it's just a driver license. I'm not going to pay a lot of money, right? So what we are doing nowadays, we don't offer as a standalone service. But let's say if you used our service to acquire the residency, right? We have, I don't know, like hundreds of people who use our service for the retirement residency, for the digital nomad residency, and so on. So if you used our service for that one in particular, yes, we're gonna assist you with the driver license under an additional fee. But in my opinion, the fee is not like really enticing enough for us to start chasing people to sell the service. It's more like a convenience that we wanna make available to our clients. All right, Andrew, I hope that was helpful. Sarah, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Sarah, for participating. Keeping the participation coming, Sarah. Paul Fonseca, and guys, I see here we are getting closer to the end of our live stream. Lots of interesting questions today, a lot of participation. I am very happy when I see a lot of action. Okay, so next live stream we're gonna have is gonna be next Sunday. All right, we're gonna skip on Wednesday again. I'm gonna be traveling on Wednesday, so I'm not gonna be able to have the live stream, but we're gonna be back again on the 19th, right? So January the 19th is going to be another Sunday, naturally, 7 days from now. And we're going to meet at the same time, 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time, all right? We did create, the link. So if you come to our website and you click on the notify me, YouTube is going to send you a message as soon as we are starting the live stream. So that is going to remind you, and it's going to allow you to have other topics of your interest discussed just like today. And I would really appreciate if you guys could come. And also, don't forget to like our live stream. If you could just click on the like button now, that's going to help our live stream, of course, and it's also going to help other people just like you to find this content later on. Because when you like it, Google thinks the content is valuable, and it's going to be more prone to share this live stream recorded with other people searching for the subjects that we are discussing. So I really appreciate if you could like our live stream now. And let's get a final question for today. Paul, will my CPF be good enough to get a loan from a bank in Brazil, or will my credit in the States also be used? Paul, usually you don't get a loan right off the bat, right? I know, I think you are, right? Like, I cannot share, of course, client information over here. So let's do like in the, infinitive, like it was someone else. So if a person is starting their journey as a first citizen in Brazil as a resident, right? That's when the person gets the CPF. Believe it or not, nowadays we have something coming from the United States. Like we didn't have a credit score system until a few years ago. If I'm not mistaken, it's like Experian. Experian came from the US to Brazil and partnered up with a local credit bureau, and now we have pretty much the same technology that the United States has in terms of credit history. So just like the US, it does take time for you to get or to develop your credit score. So usually, Paul, right off the bat is somewhat difficult for you to get a loan. But my recommendation is, like, don't panic, don't stress, just well as I do that, life happens, time flies. So get started in your journey, and in a few years from now, yes, you should be able to get a loan, all right? But usually right off the bat, that's not the case, right? Like it does take a few years for the algorithm to start to understand that you are credit worthy. And that's when, banks start to, give you like a line of credit, or, allow you to apply for a traditional mortgage. All right, Paul. So I want to say thank you again to all of you. Wishing you all a blessed rest of your Sunday. And we're gonna meet again on the 19th. And I'm not gonna skip on Ronnie. He's asking about our address. I'm gonna share for sure. Avenida Rio Branco, 123, Suite 1712. That's in Rio de Janeiro, downtown. All right. And you can just Google it. You just Google it. You're gonna see. If you use Waze, if you use Google Maps, our address is out there. You just type Oliveira Lawyers in Rio de Janeiro. You're gonna get to the right location. All right. Well, there you go. There are even fireworks today. This live stream is it's something. But there you go. And you guys, there is something here for me to tell you. You don't need to pre-schedule a visit as long as you're dropping by for Brazilian coffee. Now, if you're gonna drop it by for services, if you're gonna drop it by, to ask questions, then that's not the case. Our team in our offices is there, like to develop, to assist our clients, but the onboarding is not done at the premises. We also avoid, like to handle money, like a lot of foreign citizens, they show up with cash, and if you know Brazil, like we don't want to have cash in our offices, right? So we don't want to have cash. We don't want to have checks. We don't want to handle cards. So all the onboarding is done offline. But I'm sure you guys know we've been doing that for a while, and it works pretty smoothly. So onboarding you do prior to visiting our office if you're going to retain a service. If you want to drop it by just for a cup of coffee and some, like random conversation with our team, you are welcome to show up without any appointment whatsoever. All right. Again, as long as you understand you cannot show up, to ask questions and get free advisory, I would love to see you in our office. All right. And you guys have a blessed rest of your Sunday.